Welcome to the Agency Rocket Show, where we discuss creative, business, growth, and honestly just the general chaos of running a creative business. And it's definitely owned by two very spicy ladies. I'm Liz Hunt.
I'm Chelsea Poppens. In our latest episode, our very first episode actually, we introduced the goal of this podcast. We introduced ourselves, DayCloud Studios, and how our partnership came to be. In this episode, we plan to discuss the juicy topic of bad agency practices and what lessons we learned in our mistakes and successes throughout that time. We have Timanus here with us today, our wise owl and agency expert. She's currently works for DayCloud Studios and has multi-agency experience and therefore has seen it all, experienced it all, and we're happy to have her today. Hey, Megan!
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, but I'm also happy to be here.
Chelsea, you definitely took my line. Half of those were my lines.
Oh, you're true. You're very true.
I know. I'm just sitting over here like an idiot.
Drinking your juice.
Drinking my Zevias. With my eyeball twitching out of my face. Ugh,
well, it'll give us a little bit of grace. We're still working on the handoff.
Cool. Well, anyway, we have Megan, and it's beautiful, and she's beautiful, and we're so excited to have her here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
We can take some time to chat with you ladies.
Heck yeah.
I'm excited to hear all your juicy stories and
all of good ones.
I bet.
I don't know if we'll see where it goes today. I just wrote down some things, but yeah, it was lots of stories. This might be like a 4-parter.
That's cool. We got lots of time.
Well, give us a little background of you as a designer, where you started, where you are now, and some of the places that you've worked. Or maybe don't name drop the places that you worked, but maybe
I probably will.
Yeah, we won't name names.
I have definitely been around the block. I have been designing for I think it's almost 20. I'm getting really close to 20 years now, so I've been doing it for quite a while. And I started out right out of college. I got an associate's degree at Metro here in Omaha, Nebraska, and I started out doing agency work right out the gate. I got really lucky and got a couple of really good internships, couple great internships, a couple of really good large ad agency jobs that I worked for quite a while until I got my first full-time gig. And so I think that was a 6-year stint and then the recession hit and some things kind of changed in the industry. Getting a job it's sort of between two things. I sort of wanted to go back to school because I always wanted to get my bachelor's degree. And, I already had the associates and I just needed to do a little less than 2 years. And so I also really wanted to get my hands on I wanted some tactile design experience because I was just so digital and I was just doing everything. So everything was just looking so flat and digital to me that I really wanted to get back in touch with like handwork and analog design techniques and whatnot. So I went back to school and then I graduated with it's a studio art degree, but I spent most of my time letterpressing. So doing a lot of very tactile design. So doing a lot of things. Do letterpress and printmaking was my guess, not my minor, but just sort of my specialization. And then I worked for a paper making studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I did a lot of letterpressing and really job start to finish, from making the paper and the job to wrapping and putting the price tag on things. So like really full circle of the design process there. And then Lincoln's where I started teaching. And then I went from a community college in Lincoln to Upper Academia in Omaha, Nebraska, and taught for 8 years. And then now I'm back in the design industry after 8 years of teaching and design, so teaching design. And so I've been a couple of spots now. I found myself very happily at DayCloud.
That's the agency Chelsea and I own.
If you listened to our last episode, which I hope you did to get you yourself here.
Yeah.
Lady-owned business with some powerful badass MFOs. Oh wait, can we
Censor beep.
Yeah, can we do light cussing?
I said mild cussage,
Okay.
but not from her.
Did I say that?
I don't know.
She said if it happens, it happens. If we need to bleep it, we can.
I'm going to refrain, but you can do all the cussing you want.
The bleep, I think they're hilarious, so I love a bleep.
I'm the editor, so I can bleep whatever I want.
Bleep my whole name.
This is Megan worked at beep.
Beep. I love the implication of whatever a bleep is supposed to hold place for.
Yeah.
You have to think. It's so much funnier.
It's true.
I think it's really neat that you have that teacher background. Mm-hmm. I guess one of my questions for you, since you did have a season of teaching people, like what did that kind of perspective did that give you on the design world and like you as a designer rather than like having to go and teach designers to know that space and then kind of like working at an agency? What kind of perspective did that give you?
That's a great question. It did a ton for me creatively, and it gave me I have so much creative direction experience now from teaching because I was just the creative director for up to 35 people in some classes. So hundreds of people have sat in front of me and I've had to lead them from concept to the most creation possible. And so I learned a lot, which I think this sort of changes when you're in an agency. It's very different because I don't want to say power dynamic, but there's just like a different kind of relationship. But when you're working with other people, it's not quite, because students do get a little afraid. I digress slightly and I'll come back, but students do get a little afraid to they don't know how to speak their mind. So when you're with your coworkers, they do a little bit differently. So I do think it changes a bit differently because all of a sudden you've created a project and you're like, no, we're getting somewhere. I'm bringing you to your vision. And so I've kind of had to learn a lot of ways to navigate me actually designing something via a person. That was a big lesson because I didn't want to, because I think early on in my career, I was pushing students very hard all around me to do the best thing they could possibly do. And then looking around and realizing that a lot of these projects were too much a piece of me, if that makes sense. The classroom was maybe the skill I pushed them to what I know. And I think that can be good. And this is very debatable. So I'm sure if any educators are listening, you want to push them as far as they can go. So the projects might not be quite as, I'm not going to say good, but quite as challenging to them as they could be in some ways, but it's what they can do. It's what they can produce. It's the limit. So that's really hard, kind of not putting yourself into a lot of students' projects, but I really learned it. I really had a system down towards the end. So to answer your question, Chelsea, a ton of creative direction, a ton of ideation, a ton of, I feel like this is still hard all the time, but really understanding my process and how I come to my ideas and how I kind of come to my workflow. I really got an amazing I have an amazing path that's so much different from when I was teaching about how to get something produced. I don't have as much sort of that panic in the beginning of a project. I know I just go through my steps and things they're going to find them. They're going to evolve. They're going to show themselves. So that really changed. Students constantly showed me new ways of doing things. I love my students who would watch tutorials because they could come and they could bring it into the class, and students were constantly teaching me new things that they were learning. So I think that there was a good little symbiosis there. Probably the big things. The thing that I think I missed out the most in teaching was probably the new technology of process of an agency, or how a particular agency goes through process, or just little things in programs that are different now than they were when because I never had to finalize a lot of stuff because I was, so there was there was a big curve coming out of teaching doing that. But I mean, you learn a ton about management, honestly. You learn a ton about creative direction. You learn a ton about the capacity of ideation for certain things. I learned almost too much, I think, in a lot of directions about type and like grid structures and stuff, to where it's almost paralyzing the amount of rules, like that gets. But I find that stuff kind of breaking away a little bit and coming into breaking out of these sort of the rigidness of, like, I guess, the bullet points that I would put on a project that I just want people to understand. Cause like retention is, I think the average retention of a class is somewhere around 20%. So you have to overteach a ton so that that 20% is bigger than it would be if you undertaught them. So sometimes students feel like they learned a ton and really, they're walking away with like a margin of that, and each one of their 20% is different. And so that can be really challenging. So, but I also did learn a lot about organizing a lesson and sort of organizing like the introduction of an idea. It's been like a hurdle into the design world. I guess this is a whole nother topic. I'm not at teaching.
Well, so as you're thinking and as you're kind of talking about some of these things, what are some of those practices that you learned, some of those processes, the creative direction and all that stuff that you really learned during teaching that you've brought in to DayCloud? Because, while I guess you were out of teaching for about a year, you freelanced, you worked at another agency or so, I think, did a couple of different things. And then you have since also come to DayCloud. And been with us for a while as well. And so, what are some of those things that you picked up during teaching that you've been able to, implement and bring into practice here?
I think... Well, I haven't... I was going to say, I think I've seen quite a bit of that with some of, designers that come into DayCloud, and how you teach and how you coach and how you talk to them and talk them through some of the DayCloud processes, which is really neat to see.
Share some of that stuff.
I would definitely say, for me, I do a brainstorming and ideation specific process for myself, which Liz definitely gets brought in right away with illustrating concepts. So even having some kind of communication there about this is going, and I want you to approve these particular lots of check-ins before things are built too much. I would say that's something I've learned, not a ton micromanaging, but just we're at this stage, check in at this stage, we're at that stage, check in at that stage. And I've put myself in a place where I've tried to, I guess, support Liz as the position I was, if that makes sense. So to be the best representative of what worked for me or what I see works for Liz. So I think that's, this taking feedback X and involving her in the process and understanding sort of when to step in with rationale and when not to step in with rationale, and I guess also, well, I would say collecting questions for specific times, but Liz she's so great at answering questions whenever you have them. So I don't really do that too much here. Just Liz, but really understanding, I guess, being sort of it's really helped me be in sort of a position where I'm highlighting Liz's creative direction, I think. And I'm really trying to make this process, because ultimately, you are supporting, that is your funnel to everything. That's your funnel to all creative work. So I think it has really helped me as a designer be able to talk and to think and to ideate and to make sure that I'm sketching ideas before I get too far, or make sure I'm not too far in a design before I'm off path. I've also kind of promoted. We haven't done a lot of this lately because projects have been like a little different than they kind of ebb and flow different projects, but an initial check-in and then a process check-in and then an initial check-in and then like something that is before a client, before client sees, and then, or, so let's see, I'm trying to think what else. Also like the brainstorming technique that I brought in, and I have some other stuff like that, like just getting, which, you know, for anybody listening, there's a brainstorming technique. It's called it's 3 numbers. It's like the 6-5-3. You get 6 people with 5 ideas 3 times, something like that. And you pass it around, and it's a really quick ideation, or like a really quick brainstorming mechanism to get things on paper and help those people that don't necessarily do well at shouting out. I haven't had a ton of experience at DayCloud yet, leading quite the way that I have the potential to. So I think, you know, in the future when, and I think that even might change like fairly quickly. I don't know. Like I think I've been here almost a year soon. So there was definitely, I always think, and this is a industry thing that like really irks me, but I think it takes you a year to understand the cycle of where you're at, to really understand like how things work and really absorb. And that second year you should be flying. But some people say designers should be adaptable and you should be able to come in like 3 to 6 months. And I get 3 to 6 months might make sense, but as far as like producing at a maybe a work level, but that first year is really where you're like, I got this. You should be feeling like that. And
I agree. I think any job, I think I've heard that it takes at least 6 months to even kind of know what your role is. And then
where the bathroom is.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. So, I mean, some jobs for sure. And then for sure, at least about a year is when you should be like, oh, I feel like I have some things under my belt. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know what my goals are. I know what my role is, you know, and even then I think you're still kind of learning some of the like big picture stuff. So I totally agree with you that a year is a full cycle.
I think it's like, if understanding like small agency life, you're bouncing from like a branding project to a website project. So there's like, or like small projects in between. So the processes are different. And to get a full feel of the processes, you have to kind of do it at least kind of be like, oh, well, I got this now. So I'm like, I don't think that encompasses that 3 to 6 month timeline.
No
like,
way.
Like a year definitely to get that repetition, get the practice in, and then understand the company that you're working for.
For sure.
I feel very strongly about from concept to completion. That is, if you've done that once, that's next time should be like, oh, the first time I did this, I have a question about this. The first time I did this, but I have a question about. You can't say, oh, well, we went through brainstorming and we went through concept development twice on 2 different things, so you should have it done for the third. No, you haven't gone from like the full circle of a job, so it's still, you don't really know when I this, then I that, when I this, then I mean, that could be the way I'm thinking and the way I think and my ability to like learn and adapt. But really a full cycle of a job is when I start understanding what comes next and what I do here, and ask better questions after I've done a full cycle of a job, I suppose.
So whenever you think about, you know, some of the lessons that you've learned coming to DayCloud versus, or like being at DayCloud versus some of the past agencies that you've worked at, not like teaching, but like other agencies versus DayCloud, what are like 1 or 2 that, maybe 3 that are like really highlighted for you?
So
if you have any DayCloud bad practices, leave them out of this podcast. We don't need to do it.
Just tell us after the podcast so that we can make it right.
Okay. Well, the caveat I was going to say is, I think all of these things are they're what I think are bad practices, and
Oh, sure.
what everybody thinks are bad practices.
Yeah.
So even if there's something where the two of you are like, we kind of do that, just feel free to chime in on me.
Chelsea and I are like, actually, Megan, we
Megan,
totally.
that's your job.
Yeah.
Like, this one feels targeted.
Yeah. Is this one really about DayCloud?
Your question, Liz, is can you ask your question one more time?
Well, we could do a couple different ways, and maybe that's why my question was confusing. But my question really was like, what are some practices that you've seen at DayCloud versus what you have experienced at other agencies? So, like, maybe some like good and bad versus.
Okay, yeah. Well,
You can start with the bad practices of other agencies and just tie in what you like about DayCloud.
DayCloud right off the bat is a little, I don't want to say like looser in any kind of an unprofessional way, but just more like the rigidity is like the lack of rigidity is freeing. And obviously you got to get things done and, be professional and like do good work and keep things as tight as possible. But there are a lot of designers that I know. There's a saying like, we're not saving babies here. And, we're not. And then I think someone recently said they were working at a place and someone said, this is not a hospital, and I think there is somewhat of that mentality, in not a way that the work isn't serious and not a way that the work isn't important, but in that we are human. This is a space like that you can learn and grow and change in, and you're not stifled by a seriousness in the design world that I think holds a lot of people back. I suppose. So I see that at DayCloud, which I've definitely worked at other places that very much are not like that. And that can be really challenging and stressful and just really anxiety inducing. And anything, like the slightest kerning mistake, you're like sick about it for the rest of the night, things like that. And so I think that is really good, because I think that's where people feel a lot of freedom to change, because they're not so focused on being perfect in what they know, which, it's good to be an expert in what you know. I guess I'm going to constantly go back to that. Like, yes, it is important to have wonderful, really tight, beautiful work, but I think people feel a bit of a freedom to branch out when they don't feel this perfectionism rigidity. I would also say that our process is really interesting.
Do you mind if we park on that for just a second? Because I obviously have thoughts about that, and that is a very purposeful. Like, I have curated that culture on purpose, right? Because I believe that, I am a perfectionist. Surprising, I know, because we literally just got done talking about how our culture is not about perfectionism. But I am. And I try really, really hard to facilitate a culture of excellence versus a culture of perfectionism. And I guess that is my language for explaining kind of like what you're talking about. How we try to do amazing work and still like hit the mark and still do great, at what it is that we're doing. And so like, I'm always trying to make sure that like what we're doing is excellent. But I also believe that I employ humans. and human beings are innately, I believe, broken and innately just going to screw things up, because I know I do all the time, right? And so like, I can't expect perfection from my staff and my employees, because I know that I can't be perfect and I am not perfect. And so like I can't hold my people to a standard that I can't even hold myself, right? And so that's part of that culture. And then, I heard it was either Wyden or Kennedy. I don't remember which one it was, but I heard him say that creatives all in their environment, they always have to feel like they are safe in their environment because it allows them to take risks in their work. Because if they don't feel safe in their work environment, then they're not going to be able to take risks with their work. And so I've really latched on to that with the culture that we try to create at DayCloud. And I've really tried to make sure that, to your point, Megan, that our team does feel safe to fail and to make a mistake and to be excellent, but not perfect. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's always been like something that I have strived for and curated at DayCloud as a part of our culture. And it's because of that. It's so that our team can feel safe enough to produce work that is risky or work that is, like a little bit crazy or, whatever it needs to be so that our work can be like risky enough, right? But they feel safe in their jobs because
in order to balance that out, I lean towards everything has to be perfect. You guys, I demand perfection.
Oh
guys.
my goodness, Chelsea.
Oh God.
For those of you that don't know,
someone's got to balance the creative.
Chelsea
guru.
is anti-perfection. Oh my goodness. So
anti-perfect.
But that's. I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up because I guess I didn't even really realize that was an undercurrent part of our culture. But I'm so glad that you brought that up because that makes me so happy that you feel that because it absolutely is true.
I think there's been a couple of places I can think of that say things like, we can make mistakes here. And it'll be like a tenet of their culture. But yet you have 3 meetings about the mistake you made when you make a mistake.
Holy
and
moly.
So it doesn't, you are quote unquote forgiven. And but that is not dead in you, that there is a consequence that you kind of go to. You have to sort of defend it or be in a meeting or a post-mortem review where you have to sort of talk about this mistake. And I think those can be good. I think the reviewing a project, what went good, what went bad here, and sort of everybody freely saying like, I made a mistake here and I made a mistake. But I've been places where you make a mistake and you hear about it from your manager, and then you hear about it from the person that manages them. And then it comes up in a performance review, and then someone writes it in an anonymous assessment. And then you have a post-mortem about the idea. And by that point, you've heard about this mistake you've made at least 5 or 6 times, and you're just beaten down.
Yeah. Seriously. Beaten down.
And it can be really hard on you. And I know from experience with Liz that if I make a mistake, it is almost me. Well, this has happened, but I've reminded her that I made a mistake and she's forgotten about it, which is unusual and shows that she is we are past that and we're on to the next thing, and we truly are working on the next thing. And I truly do have the room to learn and change because I do think like repeated mistakes are a thing, or a large mistakes, absolutely. I think there's different sort of like metrics of measurement for all of those things.
Yeah.
But like I can say from experience that I don't feel like the same kind of panic that I know that there is going to be an impact I'm going to have to feel after such and such has happened. Or even when someone else does. So like even when another designer makes a mistake, or somebody, the copywriter does something wrong, I know I'm not going to have to go to 2 meetings about this. And so that's good.
Thank God for Liz being 50 and having dementia.
Okay. Okay. That was very targeted, Chelsea. Yeah.
But it's good. I do think like that the environment of grace and seeing grace in action in the workplace is something at DayCloud I haven't seen quite the level anywhere else. Where I have seen people in my short time here, I've seen people fall on their face and they are immediately, it's like, what do we got to do now? Where are we at? Got to get done to get this. What do we have to do next? How can we avoid this happening in the future? And I think that Liz and Chelsea are walking the walk. We're walking their talk. Yeah. Like they're putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to that, and there might be a little joking about it. You're not belaboring the point. And that I think does a lot to, especially designers who I think we go through so much mental labor to do our job in the first place. And it gets so incredibly difficult. And this is something I've dealt with really recently, but it gets so incredibly difficult to like switch your brain off from design mode to like checking mode to like proofreading, it gets so incredibly difficult to do those things. It's just, like knowing that I'm in a place where someone can say to me, this is a problem, don't do this again, or like we look unprofessional here or something like that, like a small thing that happens, and I know that it's like, no, they really mean this is a mistake and it's something we need to be careful about, but like I'm not going to see this 6 more times, we're not going to talk about this 6 more times. I know I'm not going to have if we mention it, it's the most we can do about it is not do it again. You know what I mean?
I think it's a piece of being like a small business. With a small team, we don't have time to micromanage you or like belabor the mistakes that we make, because everyone's going to make mistakes. It's a fast paced agency. And when everyone's running around, something's bound to happen. And it's just kind of inevitable piece of working at an agency and working in a team environment.
To that point though, even being a small agency, you can be a micromanager and you can be someone that is a big time control freak and, all that stuff. But I think it's the way that Chelsea and I choose to lead and our, the style that we want to manage is to be open-handed with our people and to be trusting and to always choosing the benefit of the doubt for our people, and always choosing like we're here to empower you, we're here to hook you up and to see you do what you do best every day. And I'm not here to
babysit.
I'm not here to babysit. I don't want to babysit. Yeah,
you said a really key word there, which is trust here. And like even trust despite someone making an error is kind of a quip way to say what I'm trying to say. Like, there's still trust there. And I've definitely had it said to me that I haven't been trusted before, even just based off of my curiosity alone. Because you both know I have like a real appetite for like learning and asking questions and maybe asking the same thing until I really understand it 2 or 3 different ways. And I feel like you both walk the talk of saying, I have hired you, you are the expert here of that, be the expert here of that. That's what I'm trusting and giving to you. And so like the ownership of that is also something to be proud of. And I think that trust of really lets the person in that role sort of carry their title and say, I am the expert here. I am the person in charge of this. And I do understand this is the best method, or this is the right idea, or just empowering, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. What else?
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
Perfectionism was a big one. Oh man, boy, I've been in so many instances, because I mean, I don't know, I must have worked like 10 or 15 places. I did like all agencies, all different sizes, all different kinds of people, all different kinds of work environments. because I did this, I it's not necessarily freelancing, it was agency freelancing. So I'd be at one place for 3 months, and then I'd be another place for 2 weeks, and then I'd be another place for...
How many agencies have you been a part of? Just numbers, like...
I think like...
You can give a rough estimate too.
I think like, I'm going to say 15, something like that. It's been a like So I've done like, not like a part of, but like work for and been in that environment and done things for.
Yeah.
Like different kinds of work environments. So because that's when they were the agency freelancing world, like you went in, you brought your stuff in, you worked there for the day,
right? And
you came in every day, and at the end of the day, you hoped you were coming back tomorrow. And that was extremely stressful. And I don't recommend it. And I hope they're not doing those practices, because people will take them while they're looking for something else. But it was extremely stressful. It would be like, oh, you're on this project for 2 weeks, and then like a project gets cut, and then you didn't hear from an agency for a month, and then they're like, hey, we have a 3-month job for you. It was a lot. It was stressful.
Yeah.
I think if I had another source of income and I was doing it different, well, I did, but I had like a night job at the time. But then like you take, so I was working, like, if we were just saying, I was working like how much we were working in our 20s, but I was working 2 jobs, but that meant when things were famine, I just had 1 job. And that meant when things were feast, I had over 60 hours a week, 2 jobs, you know?
Yeah.
Or like, I guess almost 80. I don't know, like, yeah. So it was just a ton. I remember being like really exhausted.
I guess that kind of like ties into like, well, as we're like wrapping this up, but like, what kind of advice would you give like designers starting out, like coming out of college, freelance, to like possibly looking to work for somebody?
I know.
We're right at that 40-minute mark.
I know.
I'm like,
I might have to come back.
We're gonna have a series.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a series on this one.
Because there are so many. I have a couple things. Advice for designers: if you're seeing that an agency is having a lot of very short stints, you're going to work hard there. Just walk in knowing you're going to work hard there. If you see somebody who was like there for a year, somebody's there for 6 months, somebody's there, a lot of that. And I think that can be very different nowadays, because things are very different in these last 2 or 3 years. But if you see a very vivid pattern of that over a 6-year, just know, I'm not saying it's bad to work there. I'm not saying you don't want to work there. I'm just saying, no, you're going to hustle. You're just going to hustle.
Yeah.
I would also say, believe all stories from everybody that's worked everywhere. Everything you hear, just believe it and let them live all as truths.
Yeah.
Like, they're all those people's truths, right? They're all those people's experiences. It's sort of that thing where it's like, understand like the spectrum of people's experiences and know that like somewhere you fit. And that's not going to be, so like, you don't want to say, so-and-so says it's a bad place to work, I don't want to work there. Know that was their fit, that was their experience, if that makes sense to me, or if that makes sense to you. So like, you're not saying like, heed the warning of those people necessarily. You're walking in there saying like, this is what I have in common with this person, and this is how I am like them, and they had this experience. What does that tell me about working there? So like, you can really identify, because I really surprised myself with some places, fit in really well with places people said they had a hard time at, and fit in really badly in places people said they had a great time at. So it really is different.
It's more of like heed the warning of those people, but don't let it keep you from like going in for an opportunity. Just more of like, just walk into that opportunity with your eyes wide open, knowing that, hey, there are some things that have been said, and you just know that it could go poorly based on what those people have said. Is that kind of what you mean?
And believe the good as much as the bad.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Like when you hear good things, believe people.
Yeah.
Don't let just, horrible things, like, because all you'll hear me say like, oh, I don't know, I had a bad experience here, it didn't work out there. And then at the end I'll go, well, what? I don't know, that was me, like that was my experience. And I'm a particular kind of person. And so
Yeah.
I think like,
especially in agency world, there's a lot of very strong personalities and a lot of very just like, there's a wide spectrum of personalities.
Oh, yeah.
So like, to your point of like, there's a lot of specific styles of people all over the board for different agencies. And so I think you're right. There's different cultures and different communication styles and just work styles and things for all the different agencies around. So
yeah, there's a particular, even to the first point, I guess I should say there's a particular agency I was thinking of when I was talking about the first point about like the years there, that like really good designers always there for 2 years, or always there for 2 years, or always there for 2 years. And I think that's how long it takes for them to burn out at that particular place. They just burn out over and over, and just really good people. And what I've heard from them is, why don't you work there anymore? Each one, which I think you could do that anyway. But I guess I wanted to go back and say that.
Yeah.
And then to the second point, it's just believe the full spectrum of people's experiences and understand that you are different. And so I do think when it comes to working somewhere that like, nobody is 100% good and 100% evil, you're going to land somewhere. And some people, I've walked into the same environments with people that have thrived, where I was looking around going, what is going on around here? And they loved it, so it really is like your unique experience. And those aren't failures too. I think that's like another thing I would always tell students is, you can say they're failures because failures are good, but those are always steps to get you to the place that you need to be, or somewhere where you're going to be thriving. So you might be like, oh gosh, I was only here for 6 months and it didn't work out, or you left after a year or something like that. All that is getting you to the place you need to be. Yeah. And I think like you have to understand that isn't like, it's not a mark of your career. It's not a mark of who you are. It's not a mark of any kind. It's not a mark on that place, really specifically, like really my only point there is just know you're going to hustle if you see that happening. Yeah. But just like those little bumps could be bumps that are lifting you up. You just have to, I've fallen on my face so many times and I get back up, and I always find myself better, after I pick up the pieces over and over again. I'm resilient. And I think as a designer, you have to be, and if you want to do this, you will be. And I think that's kind of a lesson you have to learn on your own, but just know that it happens to all of us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I have like 12 other things, so some other time maybe I'll come back.
Love agency bad practices, good and bad practices series 2. Well, thanks for joining us today.
I know, golly, oh my goodness.
I loved hearing your insight and journey as a designer, and then all the advice that you have for young designers and creatives out there. In our next
one
episode,
more thing, biggest advice if anybody's ever listening to this is invest in your 401k in your 20s.
Seriously.
As
soon as you're able to, start putting stashing money away in your 401k.
We'll bring Andrew in for one of our episodes to talk about financial
or designers.
This is student advice. That's always at the end of class. I would always be like, all right, you guys are heading out there into the world. One piece of advice for you. This is it.
Save for retirement as early as possible. As early as starting at 18. Start at age 18.
All right. Well, in our next episode, we're going to be discussing branding with a very special guest that got done branding her business with us. So tune in next week to find out who and what the branding experience was like for her. If you like our podcast and like the content that we're talking about, please like, share, follow, or if you have any questions or feedback, make sure it's good. I'd love to hear it.
Bye.